Every day you use logic for arguments and inferences. From convincing your friend to watching a movie to realizing that some things are not necessarily true. But what makes one argument solid and another fall apart? Let's break down logical arguments. Welcome to Konario, where we turn big ideas into practical tools. Today we're diving into logical reasoning. You'll learn what a logical argument is, to spot a valid or a sound argument, and some rules of logical inference that help you reach conclusions. We'll need to get through some fundamentals, but they will make sense in the end. Logical reasoning is the process of drawing conclusions from premises using formal rules. It's about structure, not how we may feel. If your premises are true and your reasoning is valid, your conclusion must be true. In this video, we're gonna talk about deductive reasoning. This is the logical process which has guaranteed true conclusions. It all starts with the definition of logical consequence. It is something we use all the time. If this, then that. The first part is called the premise, while the last part is the conclusion. This truth table shows that for all combinations of truth values for premise P and conclusion Q, whether you can say that P implies Q. The important part is that if P is true, then Q must also be true for the consequence to be valid. That is shown in the first line of the truth table. For the other cases, if it's possible for P to be true and Q to be false, we cannot say that P implies Q. That's the second line of the table. And on the other lines, if P is false, Q can assume any value. From that, we can also define that a valid argument means that if premises are true, the conclusion must follow. In other words, a valid argument has the form P implies Q. And we can define a sound argument to be valid and having true premises. In other words, a sound argument has the form P and P implies Q, such that the comma is representing that both P and P implies Q are true. What's the difference in practice between these kinds of arguments? Let's see this example. If the premise is all birds can fly and penguins are birds, we conclude that penguins can fly. By the definition of validity, this is a valid argument, because it doesn't matter that the premises are true or not for the argument to be valid. On the other hand, by the definition of soundness, this is not a sound argument because the premises must be true for them to be sound. Not all birds can fly. An important note is that anything follows from false premises, according to the last two lines of the truth table. And here we have a categorization of the kinds of arguments. And in this video, we are focusing on deductive arguments that only depend on logic and not on observation. Rules of inference are laws that derive conclusions from premises. The most important ones are about finding truth even premises that include at least one true implication. These are things that we use all the time in daily life. First, we have modus ponens, or affirming the antecedents, which is very straightforward. You have as premises an implication from P to Q, as well as P, and then we can conclude Q from the logical implication. For example, if it rains, the ground gets wet. It is raining, therefore the ground gets wet. Modus tollens, or denying the consequence. You have the premises if P then Q, and you have also the premise not Q. You can conclude that P is false or not P. For example, if the alarm is set, it will ring. It did not ring, therefore the alarm was not set. And lastly, we have the hypothetical syllogism with the premises if P then Q and if Q then R, which is like a chain of implications. We can conclude that if P then R. For example, if I exercise, I'll get fit. If I get fit, I feel healthy. Therefore, if I exercise, I'll feel healthy. Given these definitions, what's an argument you've heard recently that didn't add up? Post it in the comments and let's analyze it together. And if you're interested in logic fundamentals, you may want to watch our last video on the topic. Thank you for watching.